Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Karoline Leavitt absolutely roasts this terrible reporter who refuses to cover the fact that Elon Musk and Doge is exposing the waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government. Let's dive in.
We're now hearing from constituents in some traditionally red districts right now complaining about what they say is the chainsaw approach and saying that it's been done very sloppily, the cuts to jobs and spending. How do you respond to that criticism?
I love how the media takes a few critics when the overwhelming response from the American people is support for what this administration is doing. If you look at the public polling, 70% of Americans, according to CBS, believe that President Trump is delivering on the promises he made. And there should be no secret about the fact that this administration is committed to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The president campaigned on that promise. Americans elected him on that promise, and he's actually delivering on it. And this is something that Democrats promised they would do for decades. President Trump is just the first president to get it done.
Let me ask you about the fraud if I can. We can all have our own opinion about what is wasteful spending, and Republicans have praised the president for cutting wasteful spending, but fraud, of course, is a crime. So have you turned over evidence of fraud to the Justice Department, and when should we expect to see those indictments?
It's a clever question. First of all, I think all Americans would agree that funding mastectomies in Mozambique is not something that the American people should be funding, or DEI programs. I think it's fraudulent that the American government has been ripping off taxpayers in this way. And we also do know there has been extensive fraud, particularly if you look at Social Security. In fact, according to an IG report from the Social Security Administration, there was $71 billion worth of fraud in one single fiscal year that we know about. And so that is a lot of fraud, Peter, that the government has admitted to. So this administration is committed to finding even more of that fraud, waste, and abuse.
To be clear, that $71 billion was from 2015 to 2022, so it wasn't in just 1 year, and it was
$71 billion.
But it wasn't in 1 year, just to be clear.
In one report.
And it was in one report over multiple years, from 2015 to 2022.
So are you defending $71 billion in fraud, Peter? That's a lot of money, far too much, and that's why this administration... Why is the media so against cutting waste, fraud, and abuse from the government? I don't get it.
I just want to ask a question.
We won't be deterred. We will not be deterred from people like you and the press who are clearly adamantly opposed to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. But we know that American taxpayers at home who have been struggling with an inflationary crisis don't want their tax dollars going towards crazy DEI programs in countries overseas. They also don't like the fact that there has been $71 billion worth of fraud in Social Security and improper payments going out the door. That's a problem that needs to be fixed, and President Trump is going to fix it. That's your fifth question. Elena, do you have anything to add?
What the problem that Doge keeps on finding is that the government has failed to keep proper records. They have failed to move into the 21st century, and we have lost a whole lot of money on the way. So that $71 billion is just a drop in the bucket, right? No, it's $71 billion. All right, that is 1% of this total payout structure. That is money that has been overpaid and money that has been, by definition, abused, all because the feds couldn't keep their records straight. That's something that needs to be cleaned up, even if it's just 1%. I don't care. Losing 1% of your body fat, that's kind of a good thing, don't you think? Losing more than that would be even better. And so you have these people out here clutching their pearls saying that, oh, Elon Musk is off the chain. He's taking a chainsaw to our government. Have you ever considered he might be cutting down the dead trees and the dead weight? Seriously, these are the same people that think that California shouldn't manage their wild spaces. Because guess what? How do wildfires start? They start because you failed to pick up the underbrush, and now, congratulations, your home is on fire. Just the stupidity, the amount of stupidity you'd have to have from bad government and bad management to think that that's a good thing. That we have a 1% of the money being paid in Social Security being abused. That is just a mental break from reality. And I simply don't understand it, other than the fact that it's essentially looking into a mirror and now realizing the reflection staring back at you is not exactly that flattering anymore. These kinds of people, ultimately, both Republicans and Democrats, have been promising to stop fraud. They promised to cut government spending. They promised lower taxes. Well, the only people that have successfully done that have been George W. Bush with his tax cuts, which worked so well that borderline communist Barack Obama, remember, a whole lot of radicals backed his campaign in 2008. By the way, thank you, Glenn Beck, for exposing just how deep that rabbit hole goes. I'm so glad I was politically in tune at that young time in my life. But Barack Obama, even as lefty as he sounded in his own rhetoric, kept the Bush tax cuts in place and instructed Nancy Pelosi and her cronies, also not to mention Harry Reid, that man was a slimy scumbag. Even Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi had to admit that those policies worked. And so, score one for the Republicans for at least cutting taxes. And now Donald Trump has enacted the Paul Ryan tax cuts. They worked and the economy boomed. And even the clueless Joe Biden had to keep them in place. Nancy Pelosi still in power somehow. I have no idea what's keeping her and Mitch McConnell working. We got to get into some of that ice cream stores that she has in her office. Man. But even Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer refused to do anything about those tax cuts and let the dice fly. And unfortunately, instead of extending them like they should have, it is now turned around to bite them in the butts, all because of the ridiculous amounts of spending that occurred under the Biden administration. And so you have the press, who has been asleep at the wheel, trying to catch Karoline Leavitt, trying to catch Elon Musk, trying to catch Donald Trump himself in these little traps and say, aha, you aren't doing exactly what you promised. It's as insipid as saying that, well, why haven't the price of eggs gone down? Ma'am, the price of eggs haven't gone down is because Joe Biden refused to do anything to combat the bird flu that was ravaging chicken coops across the country. He did nothing. He learned nothing. And now we are literally dealing with more inflation, all because we're having to deal with the aftermath of a disastrous presidency. And so this is the fundamental problem with the press, and particularly the mainstream media. Their whole goal is to get these headline moments, and after decades of abusing conservatives like Karoline Leavitt, people like Vivek Ramaswamy, and of course Donald Trump himself, have learned how to deal with the press, has learned how to deal with the insipidness, and has learned how to turn their own rhetoric against them. And it is beautiful to watch. Karoline Leavitt is running circles around these terrible reporters who, if they had any integrity, would be trying to get to the bottom of these issues a long time ago. But alas, they can't and they won't. They won't because they're complacent, and they can't because their producers don't allow them. That is ultimately the problem that we're dealing with in the press right now, and I am so deeply thankful that we finally have a press secretary, a president, and a mandate to go in and root out the corruption and abuse. Even if it's just 1% of the federal budget, that is still money that is being saved, and being saved from the abuse from our tax code. Your hard-earned tax dollars deserve to be protected. That is just the truth of the matter, and the people who can't see that, well, I don't think they're ever going to come around. After all, to quote Herman Cain, you can save the savable. But these people, I don't think it's ever going to happen. It's a bless your heart and go save who you can moment. Because these people just refuse to admit that they've been asleep at the wheel, that there have been problems that they just have refused to fix, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.